I'm supposed to talk about the Baltimore campaign, but I'd be remiss if I really didn't thank all of the party for any of the successes in Baltimore City. And I wanted to raise at least 4 names in particular, not because to exclude anyone else, because we are a collective Marxist, Leninist, working class party, and it takes all of our work to bring about what we have to do. I'd like to especially thank John Parker, because we wouldn't have been on the ballot if he hadn't taken, I think it was 3 weeks off in the 104-degree weather in Baltimore City to come out. The other person I really feel that we need to thank is Comrade Stephen Millies. Frankly, not just for Baltimore, but maybe for the entire country. Somebody is waving for me to speak louder. It's kind of hard because to talk about Baltimore, at 4:30 on Tuesday, we got up and we started to get the signs out and get to all the polls, and then we didn't get back until 8 o'clock that evening, and then around 9 o'clock, we were starting to listen to the news, and the national news was coming in, and it superseded everything that was happening locally. But I will say something, because I know that the comrades do want to hear about the local elections, and along with thanking those 2 people, I said 4 people, there's 2 people in Baltimore, 2 sister comrades, who I think were also more responsible for our local campaign than anyone else. Sister Sharon Witherspoon, who without her we wouldn't have gotten on the ballot, and Comrade Julie, but without Julie we wouldn't have gotten to the 12,000 houses that we visited in Baltimore City. So despite wanting to really talk about Trump, which I have to at least make 2 or 3 points about it, I wanted to say a few things about our local election. We haven't had a chance to analyze it, but I want to say that prior to the outcome of it, we got 7,332 votes, but we haven't actually heard, because the provisional votes aren't in. It's not all been settled, but of course we did win this bourgeois election. We didn't expect to. But 2 days before the election, we put out a piece that we had already won, because we had won the fight in the streets. Frankly, our comrades dedicated themselves night and day. We went out to not 1,200, but 12,000 homes we visited in Baltimore City, going door to door, talking to people. We passed out 20,000 pieces of literature. We really, really got to the people, and those votes were earned. And I think Comrade Rosica really explained it well, because he started breaking it down, that we had more votes per penny than any of the other candidates, both the bourgeois candidates and also the other alternative candidates. There's a lot more to talk about Baltimore's election, which was historical, because there was a whole slate of third-party candidates that ran for the first time, which broke from the Democratic Party. And we'll have to write about it, because I don't want to get here, there's not a lot of time, and there's a lot more to be said about it. And I'm sure that I'm missing something very, very critical about it. What I wanted to talk about, though, is immediately after that harrowing, difficult day, we heard the news of Trump and then had to hit the streets when some of the young students approached us. And so I really wanted to talk about what was happening on that front in Baltimore City. We have called for workers' and people's defense committees in the city of Baltimore and in the state of Maryland. And what are we talking about when we say that? That means not one single immigrant person, not any undocumented worker will we allow the fascists to touch. It's important. It's important, you've got to know. There were thousands of people out in the middle of Baltimore City demonstrating and taking over the streets. And in the course of that, there was a fascist that got out with a machete and a knife, literally in the middle of Baltimore, something that you wouldn't expect. But this is the kind of brazen fascist action that the Trump election has, brought the scum up from underneath the ground, and they are coming out of their caves and out of the woodwork, and willing to do these things. And we need to provide the protection that our class needs, especially those who are most vulnerable, whether it is a church that may be bombed or burnt down, a black church anywhere, whether it happens to be our Muslim sisters or brothers, whether it happens to be our LGBTQ, trans, and any of the other folks that may be victims of this kind of violence. We have to provide those kind of defense committees. So we actually formed on the spot and started to sign people up. And I know that, being from the union movement, I say this not against the real revolutionary unions like the school bus drivers, but there was a treacherous role that some of the union officialdom played, not only in the elections nationally, but in Baltimore City. But, as Comrade CD and me were talking on the way up here, we got to sign their members up. We've got to sign their members up to be part of these defense committees, because those members voted for us. So we have to sign them up. The other thing that we proposed we are going to form, along with our sisters in Boston and in New York City, Women's Fight Back Network. And because there is supposed to be a million women's march coming up in Washington, D.C. that we have to address. And finally, I don't want to say much about this because I know that Comrade Teresa is going to take up the counter-inaugural. But I should report what the response is when we called to shut down Washington, D.C. Whether it's through strikes, whether it's for going there and just simply physically shutting it down. I remember the Million Man March. That was an actual general strike in many respects of the black community. And we will be in Washington, D.C., and we will shut Washington, D.C. down. I promise you. We are going to shut Washington, D.C. down. We are going to make the country ungovernable. There's no doubt about this. It will be ungovernable. And on top of that, I think it's time to dust off the idea of people's assemblies again. Because really, it's those of us in the street that represent the people, not those that claim some kind of office right now. We are the real people's government. So I'm not going to say much more about that. I just wanted to really end with really an appeal, because I was struck, and I think it was a wonderful example by what the comrades in Detroit are doing in terms of this Fight Back conference. I believe that the party needs to fight to do two things. And one of them, Comrade Larry Holmes already outlined. And maybe it's interesting that all of us who've come up here hadn't had a chance to talk with each other, but we're all on the same page about this. It's kind of funny about it, actually, because we're all thinking about this. But two things I think that we really especially need to do. We need to fight to revive revolutionary socialism in this country as an answer to Trumpism. Trump, it's much more complicated, and I think that Comrade John Parker began explaining it, and we don't have the time to explain it in this conference, but in reality, it is a product of capitalism at a dead end. It is a product of capitalism in a period of decay, morbid decay, where it is at its very end stage. And it's the movement behind Trump, the movement that Trump has energized, that's the real fucking danger. And so we have to revive this struggle, because the second point to this is we cannot allow, under any circumstance, after this crisis, after this big exposure, to allow the ruling class to pull, the real ruling class to pull the masses back into the Democratic Party. That's right. On any level whatsoever. We were reading articles, okay, I do read sometimes while I drive and other people read to me, but we were reading articles, the DNC, that's all talk about Ellison, who is the Muslim congressman from Minneapolis, making him the chairperson of the DNC. I don't know what it all means, but look, they're scrambling because they know they fucked it up. They fucked it up and they know it. We cannot allow them to put the genie back and to then co-opt this movement. This movement has to move in a revolutionary socialist direction that only a Marxist-Leninist party like ours and the other groups that want to ally and work with us can do. We need to bring about revolutionary socialism. Down with the Democratic Party, down with Trump, build revolutionary socialism.